"You're confusing me with someone else," he said, his face draining of color as he tried to pull the woman beside him away. I stood frozen in the middle of the Sacramento Plaza, staring at the ghost of my husband, the man whose funeral I had arranged last year, whose death had shattered our family. Greg was supposed to be dead, lost in a boating accident, yet here he was, very much alive, holding another woman's hand. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled and said, "Don't worry. I haven't told the insurance company." Then, calmly, "But tomorrow I will." His eyes widened with panic before he turned and hurried away, the confused woman in tow. I watched them disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd just discovered. My name is Brooklyn Turner, 47 years old, and until a few minutes ago, I was a widow. For the past year, I've been raising our 2 children alone in Boise, Idaho, working as a high school guidance counselor and trying desperately to help my kids heal from the loss of their father. I've spent countless nights crying myself to sleep, wondering how I would manage without him, believing he had died in a tragic accident. The police report had been clear. His boat had been found splintered on the rocks near the shore of the reservoir where he often went fishing. His belongings were scattered through the wreckage. His wallet, his phone, his favorite fishing hat. But they never found his body. "The currents can be unpredictable," they told me. "Sometimes the victims are never recovered." I had accepted it. I had arranged a memorial service. I had helped our children, Ethan, 16, and Zoe, 14, process their grief. I had filed the insurance claim, grateful for the financial security the $750,000 payout provided as we adjusted to life without him. But now, everything I thought I knew had been a lie. As I walked numbly back to my hotel, my phone buzzed with a text from my colleague at the education conference I was attending. Meeting still at 7 p.m.? I had completely forgotten. How could I sit through a professional development dinner when my entire world had just been upended? I texted back a quick excuse and returned to my room, my mind racing. What should I do? Call the police? The insurance company? Our children? I slumped onto the bed and opened my laptop. With trembling fingers, I began searching for information about insurance fraud investigations. As the screen loaded, I noticed an email notification, an alert from our joint credit card account that I'd kept open after his death. The subject line read, "Unusual activity detected on your account." What else had Greg been hiding? Greg and I met 20 years ago in Portland, where he worked as a financial advisor, and I was finishing my master's in counseling. His charm was irresistible. He was attentive, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my dreams. We married after a year of dating and moved to Boise when he was offered a position at a prestigious investment firm. Our early years were blissful. We bought a modest house in a good school district, welcomed our children, and built what I thought was a stable life together. Greg worked long hours while I dedicated myself to raising Ethan and Zoe, eventually returning to work as a school counselor once they reached elementary school. There were signs looking back that I should have questioned. Greg's occasional unexplained absences that he attributed to client meetings or fishing trips, the strange phone calls that would end abruptly when I entered the room, the gradual emotional distance that grew between us over the years. But I trusted him. Even when our marriage hit rough patches, I never imagined he could be capable of such elaborate deception. The night before his accident, Greg had been unusually affectionate. He made dinner for the family, a rare occurrence, and suggested we plan a vacation for the following summer. "Life's too short," he'd said. "We need to make more memories together." The next morning, he kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me before heading out for a day of fishing. It was the last time I saw him, until today in Sacramento, 12 months later. After his disappearance, I discovered how little I truly knew about our finances. Greg had separate accounts I wasn't aware of. There were investments I didn't understand and debts I never knew existed. I had to hire a financial advisor just to sort through the mess he'd left behind. The life insurance policy had been my salvation, a $750,000 payout that allowed me to clear our debt, put money aside for the children's college funds, and maintain some semblance of financial stability. I had been grateful for Greg's foresight in maintaining such a substantial policy. Now I wondered if it had been part of his plan all along. In the weeks after the accident, there had been moments when I questioned the official story. A rental car charge on our credit card statement dated 2 days after his disappearance that the company claimed was an error. A mutual friend who thought he spotted Greg at a gas station near the Oregon border a week after the memorial service. The fact that his passport was never found among his belongings. Each time, I dismissed these inconsistencies as grief playing tricks on my mind. I wanted to believe in the simplest explanation. My husband was dead, and I was a widow left to pick up the pieces. How wrong I had been. The credit card alert led me down a rabbit hole of discovery. Greg had used our old joint card, a card I kept open but rarely monitored, to book a hotel room in downtown Sacramento, just 3 blocks from where I was staying for my conference. It couldn't be coincidence. Had he known I would be here? Was he following me? With shaking hands, I called the bank's fraud department, not to report fraud, but to gather information. Yes, the card has been active for approximately 3 months, the representative confirmed after verifying my identity. There have been charges in Sacramento primarily, but also in Reno and San Francisco. 3 months. He'd been using this card for 3 months, and I hadn't noticed because I'd been focused on rebuilding our lives. I thanked the representative and hung up, then immediately logged into the account to review the charges. Restaurant bills for 2, jewelry store purchases, tickets to shows and sporting events. He hadn't just been surviving, he'd been living a comfortable, even lavish life while I worked extra hours to support our children. As I scrolled through the charges, a notification popped up on my phone, a reminder I'd set months ago for Greg's life insurance policy anniversary. The cruel irony made me laugh bitterly. Tomorrow marked exactly 1 year since the policy had paid out. Was that why he was in Sacramento? Was he planning to disappear again? This time with his new girlfriend, before anyone could discover his deception? I paced the hotel room, oscillating between rage and calculation. If I reported him to the authorities immediately, would they believe me? What evidence did I have beyond a brief encounter in a crowded plaza? Even the credit card charges only proved someone was using the card, not necessarily Greg himself. I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof. Taking a deep breath, I opened my laptop again and searched for private investigators in Sacramento. I found one with good reviews and called immediately. I need surveillance on someone, I explained, my voice steadier than I expected. I have reason to believe my supposedly deceased husband is alive and staying at a hotel downtown. The investigator, a woman named Veronica, didn't seem fazed by my bizarre request. I can start tonight, she said. Send me a photo and any information you have on his current appearance and whereabouts. I sent Greg's most recent photo from before his death, along with the hotel information from the credit card statement. Then I waited, checking my phone compulsively for updates. At 11:23 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Veronica. Target located. Entering hotel with female companion. Sending photos now. The images appeared on my screen moments later. There was no doubt. It was Greg, his arm around a blonde woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing as they entered the hotel lobby, carefree and untroubled by the lives they'd destroyed. Something hardened inside me. The shock and disbelief that had carried me through the day crystallized into resolve. Greg hadn't just faked his death. He'd stolen a year of my life, traumatized our children, and committed federal fraud in the process. He would pay for what he'd done. By morning, Veronica had compiled a substantial dossier on Greg's movements. She'd tracked him to a rented apartment in Sacramento, discovered he was using the name Andrew Miller, and confirmed he'd been working at a small investment firm for the past 6 months. "What do you want to do with this information?" she asked when we met for coffee. "Go to the police?" I shook my head. Not yet. I need to understand why he did this first, and I need to secure evidence that will hold up legally. That's smart, Veronica nodded. Insurance fraud investigations can get complicated. Without solid proof, it could become your word against his. She was right. If I mishandled this, Greg might find a way to wriggle out of consequences. I couldn't let that happen, not after what he'd put our children through. I need to confront him directly, I decided. Somewhere public, with witnesses and surveillance cameras. Veronica frowned. That's risky. He could flee once he knows you're onto him. He won't, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. His ego won't let him. Besides, I have leverage he doesn't know about. The leverage was simple. I hadn't told anyone about seeing him. Not the insurance company, not the authorities, not even our children. As far as Greg knew, I was still processing the shock of our encounter, giving him time to disappear again. But I had no intention of letting that happen. I spent the day formulating my approach, rehearsing what I would say. By evening, I had my plan. Veronica's surveillance confirmed that Greg and his girlfriend had dinner reservations at an upscale restaurant downtown. It would be the perfect setting for our confrontation. I dressed carefully in a black dress Greg had always loved, applied makeup to look polished, but not overdone, and made my way to the restaurant. My heart hammered in my chest as I spotted them through the window, laughing over glasses of wine. Taking a deep breath, I entered the restaurant and approached their table. Mind if I join you? I asked pleasantly. Greg's face went ashen. Brooklyn, he stammered. What are you doing alive? I finished for him. I could ask you the same question. The blonde woman looked between us, confusion evident on her face. Andrew, who is this? Andrew? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you're calling yourself now, Greg? You need to leave, Greg hissed, standing up abruptly. You're making a scene. Oh, I haven't even started making a scene, I replied calmly, taking the empty seat at their table. Please, introduce me to your friend. The woman extended her hand hesitantly. I'm Jennifer, and you are? Brooklyn Turner, Greg's wife, or widow, according to the death certificate. Jennifer's eyes widened. What? Andrew, what is she talking about? Greg grabbed Jennifer's arm. She's confused. Let's go. I'm not confused, Greg, but I understand why Jennifer might be. I turned to her. Did he tell you he was divorced? Or did he create a whole new backstory when he faked his death and abandoned his family? Jennifer pulled away from Greg's grasp. Is this true? The restaurant had gone quiet, other diners watching our drama unfold. Greg looked trapped, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. It's complicated, he finally said. Allow me to uncomplicate it, I offered. 1 year ago, my husband faked his death in a boating accident. Our 2 teenage children spent months in therapy, dealing with their grief. I buried an empty casket while the insurance company paid out $750,000 in life insurance benefits. And apparently, while we were mourning, he was building a new life with you under a new name. Jennifer stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. You're married? With children? You told me you'd never been married before. Jennifer, please, Greg pleaded, reaching for her hand. I can explain everything. But Jennifer was already backing away, grabbing her purse. Stay away from me, you pathological liar. She turned to me. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. As Jennifer rushed out, Greg's face contorted with rage. Are you happy now? He snarled at me. You've ruined everything. No, Greg, I replied evenly. You did that all on your own. After Jennifer's dramatic exit, Greg slumped back into his chair, eyes darting nervously around the restaurant at the many witnesses to his humiliation. Keep your voice down, he muttered. This doesn't concern anyone else. Funny, that's exactly what I thought about our marriage, I replied, until you turned it into an elaborate fraud scheme. The waiter approached cautiously, sensing the tension. Is everything all right here? Just a family reunion, I said with a tight smile. We'll need a moment. After the waiter retreated, Greg leaned forward. Look, I know this looks bad. Bad? I laughed without humor. It's insurance fraud, Greg. It's abandonment. It's years in federal prison. His expression shifted, a calculated look I recognized from our marriage, the one he used when transitioning from defense to negotiation. What do you want, Brooklyn? Money? I can split what's left of the insurance payout with you. What's left? I repeated incredulously. You mean the money you weren't entitled to in the first place? The money meant to support your children after your death? Greg waved dismissively. The kids are practically grown. They don't need... Don't. I cut him off, my voice deadly quiet. Don't you dare pretend to know what they need. You forfeited that right when you chose to disappear. A tense silence fell between us. I noticed his left hand was bare, no wedding ring, of course, but there was a faint tan line. He hadn't been Andrew Miller for very long. Why? I finally asked. Was our life together so unbearable that you had to fake your own death to escape it? Greg sighed, running a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that triggered an unwelcome surge of memory. It wasn't about you or the kids. I got into some financial trouble, bad investments, people who wanted their money back. So instead of facing consequences, you decided to disappear and leave us to deal with the emotional fallout. I was protecting you, he insisted. These weren't the kind of people who take no for an answer. If I'd stayed, you could have been in danger. And the insurance money? Was that also for our protection? He had the decency to look away. I needed a fresh start. The plan was to establish myself, then reach out to you and the kids once it was safe. You expect me to believe that? I scoffed. You were building a life with another woman. Jennifer was complicated. She helped me get established here. One thing led to another. I shook my head in disgust. You haven't changed at all. Still dodging responsibility? Still blaming others? Greg reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. Brooklyn, please. We can work something out. Think about the kids. Do you really want them to go through the trauma of learning their father is alive but going to prison? The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. The trauma you caused, you mean? Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. All recorded. Audio and video clear. Do you want me to remain on standby? A wave of satisfaction washed over me. Greg had no idea that Veronica was sitting 3 tables away, capturing our entire conversation with professional-grade surveillance equipment. His admission of insurance fraud and faking his death was now preserved as evidence. I stood up, smoothing my dress. I need to get back to my hotel. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Greg looked confused by my abrupt shift. That's it? We're not going to resolve this? Oh, I wouldn't say that, I replied. I am going to resolve this, but not in the way you're hoping. As I turned to leave, Greg grabbed my wrist. What are you planning to do? I gently removed his hand and leaned down to whisper in his ear. When I said I'd tell the insurance company tomorrow, I meant it. But they won't be the only ones getting a call. His face paled. Brooklyn, wait. Goodbye, Greg. Or Andrew. Or whoever you are now. I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, leaving my supposedly dead husband very much alive but utterly shaken. Back in my hotel room, I met with Veronica to review the evidence. The audio and video were crisp, clearly capturing Greg's admission of faking his death and his knowledge of the insurance payout. This is solid, Veronica assured me. Combined with the documentation of his new identity and employment, it's more than enough for the authorities to act on. What about the financial trouble he mentioned? The people who supposedly wanted their money back? Veronica nodded. I can dig deeper into that. If there's truth to it, it could add another dimension to the case. I hesitated, a nagging doubt surfacing. What if Greg had been telling the truth about protecting us from dangerous people? Was I potentially putting our children at risk by exposing him? Let me make some discreet inquiries, Veronica suggested, sensing my concern. I have contacts who can verify if there were any serious threats against him before his disappearance. I agreed, then called the educational conference to excuse myself from the remaining sessions. This situation required my full attention. Next, I contacted a lawyer friend in Boise for a recommendation in Sacramento. By morning, I had an appointment with a well-respected attorney specializing in insurance fraud cases. Based on what you've told me, your husband committed multiple felonies, the attorney, Eleanor Wright, explained during our meeting. Insurance fraud, identity theft, potentially even bank fraud, if he used false identification to open new accounts. What's the likely outcome if I report him? Prosecution, almost certainly. The insurance company will want to make an example of him. He's looking at significant prison time and financial penalties. I nodded, absorbing this information. And what about the insurance money that's already been spent? That's complicated, Eleanor admitted. You weren't involved in the fraud, so you likely wouldn't be held liable for returning it. However, any unspent funds might need to be returned if the insurance company pursues civil action. My mind raced through the implications. Most of the money had gone toward paying off our mortgage and establishing college funds for the children. These were legitimate expenses for a widow with 2 teenagers. But the moral question lingered. Was it right to keep money obtained through Greg's deception? As I grappled with these questions, Veronica called with her findings. I found something interesting, she said. Before his disappearance, Greg had indeed made some questionable investments, primarily with a developer who was later indicted for running a Ponzi scheme. Was he in danger? Not the kind he implied, Veronica clarified. He wasn't dealing with violent criminals, but he was deeply implicated in the scheme, possibly as a knowing participant rather than a victim. When the developer was arrested, Greg might have feared he'd be next. The pieces fell into place. Greg hadn't faked his death to protect us. He'd done it to escape potential securities fraud charges. The insurance money was his safety net, and we were just collateral damage in his escape plan. That evening, as I prepared to return to Boise, I received another text from Veronica. You should know, he's making moves. Just purchased a one-way ticket to Mexico leaving tomorrow morning. My heart raced. He was planning to run again. With a newfound clarity, I picked up my phone and made 3 calls in succession. First to the insurance company's fraud division, then to the FBI's white-collar crime unit, and finally, to the Sacramento police. My name is Brooklyn Turner, I said each time. I need to report that my husband, who was declared dead last year, is actually alive and attempting to flee the country. As I hung up from the final call, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges awaited me and my children, we would face them with the truth, however painful it might be. Greg's days of running were over. They arrested Greg at the airport the next morning. I watched from a distance as officers approached him at the check-in counter, his face contorting in shock as they handcuffed him and read him his rights. The woman from the FBI's white-collar crime unit nodded at me respectfully as they led him away. I expected to feel triumphant or at least vindicated, but what washed over me instead was a profound sadness for what could have been, for the life we'd built and the trust he'd shattered. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The insurance company launched an immediate investigation, freezing the remaining funds from the policy payout. The FBI expanded their inquiry to include Greg's professional activities before his disappearance, particularly his connections to the Ponzi scheme Veronica had uncovered. Through it all, I had to prepare for the hardest conversation of my life, telling Ethan and Zoe that their father wasn't dead after all. I flew home to Boise, arranging for a family therapist to be present when I broke the news. Dad is alive? Ethan repeated, his voice hollow with disbelief. How could he do this to us? Zoe cried, her body shaking with sobs. We mourned him. I held them both as they cycled through shock, anger, and confusion. The therapist guided us through the initial emotional storm, helping them process the unthinkable betrayal. We decided together that they would wait before seeing Greg. They needed time to understand their own feelings first. News of Greg's resurrection spread quickly through our community. Neighbors and colleagues rallied around us, offering support and shielding us from the media attention that briefly engulfed our lives. My school principal granted me a leave of absence, understanding that my children needed me now more than ever. Meanwhile, Greg remained in custody, denied bail due to his obvious flight risk. His new identity as Andrew Miller unraveled quickly under investigation, revealing a carefully constructed paper trail that began months before his staged accident. According to the prosecutors, he'd been planning his escape for nearly a year, meticulously arranging the details while living with us, looking us in the eyes each day, knowing he would soon abandon us all. 6 months later, I sat in the courtroom as Greg pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including insurance fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud. His legal team had negotiated a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence, but he still faced 8 years in federal prison and restitution payments to the insurance company. Before the judge delivered the final sentence, Greg was permitted to address the court. He turned toward me in the gallery, his face haggard from months in detention. "I never meant to cause so much pain," he said, his voice breaking. "I convinced myself I was protecting my family, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. Brooklyn, Ethan, Zoe, I know an apology isn't enough, but I am truly sorry." The judge was unmoved by his performance. "Mr. Turner, you committed a calculated fraud that caused immeasurable emotional damage to your family and significant financial damage to the insurance company. Your remorse, while noted, does not mitigate the severity of your actions." As they led Greg away to begin his sentence, he looked back at me one last time. I held his gaze steadily, neither acknowledging his apology nor expressing anger. He had chosen his path. Now we would forge ours without him. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the verdict. "Justice was served," I said simply. "Now my children and I can truly begin to heal." Today, 1 year after discovering Greg alive in Sacramento, our lives have found a new rhythm. The insurance settlement was eventually resolved, allowing us to keep the funds used for the mortgage and children's education, which the company acknowledged were legitimate needs of a family who believed they had lost their provider. Ethan is now in his first year of college, studying psychology with an interest in trauma and resilience. Zoe has become an advocate for fraud awareness at her high school, turning our family's painful experience into an opportunity to help others. As for me, I've returned to counseling students with a deeper understanding of how life can change in an instant, and how resilience can be found even in the face of unimaginable betrayal. Greg's deception nearly destroyed us, but in surviving it, we discovered strengths we never knew we had.